When you hear the word yoga, what's the first thing that pops into your head? For most of us, it's probably stretching, breathing exercises, maybe some quiet meditation. But what if I told you there's a whole other side to it? A path to enlightenment that isn't about emptying your mind, but about absolutely filling your heart. Well, today we're going to dive into exactly that. Bhakti Yoga, the path of divine love. And that's really the big question at the core of Bhakti Yoga. It kind of flips the usual goal of spiritual practice on its head. You know, instead of trying to achieve detachment from everything, what if the real goal was a radical, all-in emotional connection? So what exactly is this yoga of the heart? Let's get right into it and understand what makes Bhakti Yoga so fundamentally different from a lot of other spiritual paths you might have heard of.
Okay, so at its very core, Bhakti Yoga is all about relationship. The word bhakti itself comes from a Sanskrit root, bhaj, which means to share or to participate in. And that tells you something really important right off the bat. This isn't some lonely path of hardcore self-discipline. It's a shared journey, an intimate, emotional connection with something way bigger than ourselves.
This really helps put it all in perspective. If you think about these major paths, Jnana Yoga uses the intellect as its main tool, right? It's the path of knowledge. Karma Yoga uses action as its tool. But Bhakti Yoga, it makes this incredibly bold claim that emotion, your feelings, that's the most direct vehicle to liberation. It's all about love, surrender, and grace. And this is a truly revolutionary concept. Instead of being told to suppress your emotions or get rid of them, Bhakti Yoga says, hey, bring them on. It teaches you to harness the immense power of your feelings and just redirect them, point them toward a higher purpose. This makes spirituality so much more accessible to everyone, not just folks who can spend years and years in silent meditation.
Now, this path of the heart didn't just appear out of thin air. It has this rich, fascinating history that evolved over thousands of years. And get this, eventually sparked a huge movement for social change. Let's take a quick look at how it all unfolded.
You can actually find the earliest seeds of Bhakti way back in the ancient Vedic hymns. But it's in the epic Bhagavad Gita that it really gets put on the map as a supreme path to liberation. From there, the idea just catches fire, leading to this massive bhakti movement that's swept across India. And it all culminates in these rich, story-filled texts where bhakti just blossoms into a full-blown spiritual system.
And this is where we see the real social power of bhakti. The bhakti movement wasn't just some spiritual revival. It was a social revolution. It completely challenged the idea that only certain people had access to the divine. It broke down the rigid barriers of caste and gender, proclaiming that divine grace was for everyone. You had these amazing saints like Mirabai and Kabir spreading this radical message. All you really need is a loving heart.
So we've covered the what and the why of Bhakti Yoga. Now for the really practical part, the how. How do you actually practice this path of love? Well, the tradition lays out 9 distinct methods for cultivating devotion.
The Bhagavata Purana, which is a super important text for bhakti, lays out these 9 principal ways to practice devotion. They're known as Navada Bhakti. And this whole framework shows you just how flexible and personal this path of love can really be.
And what's so cool is that there's a practice here for pretty much every personality type. It starts with engaging your senses, things like listening to divine stories, which is Shravana, and chanting or singing, that's Kirtana. Then it moves inward with practices like constant remembrance or Smarana. It even offers different ways to relate to the divine. You could see yourself as a humble servant, that's Dasya, or even a close friend, which is Sakya. And it all leads to the ultimate act of devotion, Atma Nivedana, or complete and total self-surrender.
Okay, we've seen the practices, the how. So let's zoom back out to the big why. What's the ultimate goal of all this devotional practice? What does it actually mean to find liberation through love? So, Bhakti makes a pretty bold claim. It says that pure, selfless love is the single most effective way to dissolve the ego. It's actually more powerful than any complex intellectual exercise or intense act of self-denial. Think about it. When you're in a state of pure, unconditional love, that constant sense of a separate I or me just naturally starts to fade into the background.
And this is a really key distinction from a lot of other spiritual paths. In Bhakti, liberation isn't about dissolving into nothingness or being absorbed into some impersonal cosmic energy. No, it's about entering into an eternal, loving relationship. The self isn't destroyed, it's perfected in its ability to love.
So, the ultimate takeaway here is pretty simple but so powerful. Bhakti Yoga teaches us that love can be so much more than just a fleeting emotion.
When we cultivate it with intention, when we focus it, love itself becomes a profound spiritual practice, a direct path to transformation.
So we're left with this final, challenging question to think about. In a world that so often tells us to be independent and self-reliant, Bhakti Yoga offers this totally radical alternative. What if true freedom isn't found in detachment at all, but in the total, fearless, joyful surrender of our hearts?